Happy October 3rd, everyone. BrewUnited here with Final Fantasy II. This is the first video of a four-part series. First part re-released, if you want to find out why, up here, to explain the end-to-end Final Fantasy II story. So this video will be the episode 1, and it will take from the Dark Knight to Cecil creating himself into a paladin. And then we'll break it into other chunks. Roughly, this is about 25% of the game. So what we'll do here is to run through the early game, show you some tips and tricks, also do some deep dives, and just general story playthrough. That's what I'm hoping to get out of it. Hope you'll enjoy it. If you've already seen this one because you've been a subscriber on my channel, this is exactly the same video that was before, but as you remember, I had to break it out into 4 parts instead of 2. Just a long game, right? 20 hours, cramming into an hour would really left out a lot. So what I hope you'll do is watch it all the way through if it's your first time. If it is your second time, skip to the second video because this is going to be a lot of repeat. And hey, if you want to watch it again, that's good too. So we'll see you in the video. You know, this many years later, the music still makes the hair stand up on my arms. It's one of those pieces where music gets in your head, and whenever you hear it again, it pulls you back into a time period when you were, enjoying that music, just like music is known to do. So at this point in time, I mean, 1991 was quite a few years ago. I was a pretty young guy at the time, still in high school, and I had the summer ahead of me. So this game was one of my summers among many other things that I would do, but this was a go-to for a couple of friends and I that we would play. And back in the day when you would have a phone that was attached to the wall and you would sit on the phone playing a game. This was before any potential of Skype or Zoom or any of those technologies where you could actually see each other play. Even the media we're watching it on now. At the beginning of the game, we cut to the flight of the Red Wings here. It's actually commanded by yourself, the character called Cecil, or Cecil if you're British. So the Red Wings in the game is a airship group, not the, obviously, hockey team. And your first mission is to go to Mysidia to take one of the crystals on behalf of the king. So they put up no resistance towards you coming to take it. You end up killing quite a few innocents along the way, and the crew obviously takes slight offense to this. Looting is really not part of what they are, and you try to quell that discontent within your team, but you can tell later in the game it actually really weighs on them. So here we are flying back to the city of Baron, or the kingdom of Baron, and we're meeting with the king. So we've handed over the crystal to Bagan, one of the characters that you'll later see in the game and come up against actually as a adversary. And right when you're leaving, this is what I was talking about. He's having this feeling of, hey, I didn't do the right thing here. He's wanting to question the king of why he would go to such lengths and take away crystals from, as he says here, honest people. And Bagan is the character here in the side of the king's ear, basically laying the distrust with Cecil. Cecil protests as much as he can. He gets shoved away, and he gets demoted from captain of the Red Wings and told to take this package to the Village Mist. So Village Mist is just a short walk away, and we'll get into that. And here you meet Kane, your main friend throughout the game, comes to your defense, and at this point, he's also roped in with your mission. So, hey, Kane, you like Cecil so much here, you're going to go help him and take the package to the Village Mist. So now you've roped Kane into it. You apologize to him. You're, he's playing it down a little bit here. He really doesn't think this is going to last that long, and, recommend you get some rest. So on your way back to get some rest, you meet some of the other main characters of the story. See, Rosa is kind of the love interest of not just Cecil, but also Kane, and he's already telling her exactly, what went down, and she says, hey, I'll meet with you later. And, of course, those fans of Final Fantasy would notice Cid here. Cid is a mainstay as kind of the engineer in all the games. He's also a playable character on your team, and he's the creator of the airships. And another cutscene here where Cecil is talking about how bad he feels. So, new morning, new Cecil. He's off to the Village Mist with his friend Kain, and triumphant music. Alright, so here we have an early stage tip. This is the longest walk that you can avoid carpal tunnel, going left to right on the screen in the early game. You'll get lots of fights here. I recommend going from level 10 to level 15 before you enter the Village Mist. You're going to find a lot of battles with imps. You're going to find a lot of kind of really easy battles. If you look at the health points that I'm at, I actually did not heal myself for an hour and a half doing this back and forth battle. So fought a lot of them. And actually, getting from level 10 to level 15 is critically important before you move forward. But also, if you do enough of these battles, you get some really unique items. So there you go, level 15. I'll show you some items. I got lots of cures now, lots of tents. And notice the imp icon. That's actually for a summoning that is a rare drop. A pretty rare drop. You can barely find it. So now we're level 15, heading into the cave, and we are greeted with a voice that basically tells us not to go any further. And that's not an option. We're going to complete the quest, we're going to get through, because that's the type of people that Cecil and Kain are, right? So the mist gathers. I'm going to do some fast forwarding through the fights to keep it down to a 30-minute video. So here we are fighting the Dragon of the Mist. Obviously defeat it. Yet again, we celebrate murder, as Kain and Cecil do, and we go through. So the mission is to deliver a package to Village Mist. So here we are. And the rap sheet that we have already is Murder of Innocents and Slayer of Monsters. And here we are, Serial Arsonist of Villages. So they are getting a title like Daenerys Targaryen would, Mother of Dragons. Wow, that probably is coming up next. These graphics don't really seem amazing for today's standards, but back in the day, I think it was Mode 5 or something like that, where it was changing all the different scroll in, scroll out, the battle scenes, and just the animations in general was a big step up for this series from Final Fantasy 1. And this, fun fact, this is actually not Final Fantasy 2. This was actually Final Fantasy 4 in Japan. So now we're also adding a title of, Killer of Mothers to our rap sheet. Here we have the caller that's introduced in the story, casting a summon and bringing down the whole mountain behind her. That doesn't happen throughout the rest of the game. All your summons go pretty low-key. So here we have Cecil by himself and the caller who brought down the mountain. The first thing he does is take her to the nearest inn, which is in the nearest city, and tries to get her some rest. Also, you can see the apologetic nature of him starting. He has said, look, I'm sorry I did what I did. This seems to be a recurring theme of him, though, really making bad choices or having bad choices around him and then ultimately being forced upon him. So in the middle of the night, you have him and the caller sleeping, and they're interrupted by some soldiers of Baron that came to finish the job, basically destroying all the callers of Mist by the king's orders. So in battles, I normally don't recommend attacking the furthest back because they have the highest level of defense. But in these, I actually do, because you get a little bit of extra XP, and then you can finish off the front soldiers. So once the battle's concluded, the girl here is starting to find out that you are actually a decent person deep down, and she introduces herself as Rydia. So Rydia is one of the main characters that will follow you through all the way to the end of the game and actually becomes quite powerful. Something also to mention is in the city that you first take Rydia to get rest, you find Rosa again, and you find out that she has an ailment that only can be cured by the Sand Ruby, which is in the lair of the Antlion. at this point in the game, Riddy is a level 1 caller, or in future games it would be called summoner. So we're going to rinse and repeat here. We're going to get some levels, and I'm not going to show all that just in the sake of time, but you can see that starting out, she's very low in hit points. She has very few spells at her disposal, and at this I forgot to actually get my magic points back. But she's useless in a physical fight there, as you can tell. So let's go ahead and finish this one up. We'll go ahead and get, I believe, an additional level here. There we go. And this level will take us into the cave, where we're actually going to go towards Damcyan, which is the city that we're trying to get the sand ruby. So you run into an old man here named Tella. Tella is actually a wise sage that's looking for his daughter who eloped or ran away to get married with a bard. So he decides, hey, I'm heading the same way. Why don't you come with me? My magic is definitely not strong enough to get me through this cave. We have to fight this monster together. And your sword, and also with Riddy on our side, we're probably going to stand a much better chance. So why don't we go to Damcyan together? And let's hurry, because we're both on a mission of the times of the essence. So what's standing in our way is Octomam, not Octomom, not to be confused with that. So I'm going to, again, shrink down the fight to show you some of the fundamentals here. What you're going to want to do is use lightning for both Rydia, lightning from Tella, and also Cecil's Dark Sword to continue the fight. You'll do enough damage pretty quickly. If you've got a few levels on Rydia, you should have absolutely no problem in taking him down. So, as always, Calamity follows Cecil. You're seeing Damcyan for the first time, and then the Red Wings fly over and carpet bomb the city. Obviously not a good event, and seems to be a trend in Cecil's life. We're immediately met with a horrible scene. Anna, who Tella's been searching for, his daughter, is laying here mortally wounded, and he has one person he blames for it, which is the Spoony Bard, as he calls him. I'm going to edit out the fight between them because it's just really a time sink here. So Anna breaks up the fight, says, hey, stop. And you gather around and you hear a story about how Anna wants them to work together to ultimately save Rosa. So here we are, riding a hovercraft in, as I mentioned in Phantasy Star, in a world where, swords and magic are relevant. We have technology. This path here will be important in a minute, but let's go down to the lair of the antlion. So this is a quite simple cave to go down, the lair of the antlion. Another thing to mention is that Edward is the Prince of Damcyan, and believes that the antlion is not an aggressive creature. As we can see here, that's clearly not the case. The antlion's not a bad fight. You have to keep Edward alive. He is probably the weakest character of all of the characters that you'll end up with on your team. He has some unique abilities. They're a little neat. I found him just a burden, really, to play with. Riddy at level 1, I think, is stronger than Edward, even with one basic spell. So here we have the Sand Ruby, the cure for all things that ail Rosa. They should just somehow mass manufacture these things and keep them on hand. The controls here are really difficult here. You can see either that, someone needs to revoke my hovercraft driver's license. And it's a unique area here to be able to get back to the original. So it was a way that there's no way to get back to the original city once you've crossed through. And the only way to do it is actually by using the hovercraft. So here we go back. We hold the Sand Ruby over Rosa, and miraculously, all things are cured. And we're going to skip ahead a little bit because there's a lot of dialogue here. I know it's going to be hard to read. And in the interest of time, we're going to say Rosa's now joined the party. So here we go. And we're going to head out, and let's do a little bit of housekeeping here. So we need to move the form and change around the order of who's at the front and the back. One thing to mention is if you're in the front, you will receive more damage. You'll have the ability to do more damage. So physical damage dealers at the front are a lot more effective, and magic are a lot more effective at the back. That's a dynamic that's going throughout the game. So have your fighters at the front row, your casters at the back row, and things should work out much better for you than in the past. And some of the fights will actually flip the order. So if you're attacked from behind or ambushed, that will be an issue. Here we are. So one of the things that you'll notice with Rydia is with her village being burned down, she was not really a big fan of fire. The team here gets behind her and they say, hey, come on, we really need you to get through here, so melt the ice. And she then learns fire. So from this point all the way back to when you received her, you had no way of learning fire, regardless of what level you are. And along this journey, we run into a character called Yang, who is a karate fighter from Babul, who has a sneeze attack, apparently, so Achu. I don't know why they edited it from Japanese to Achu. They should have come up with something better. Anyway, let's just show a couple of things here about his attack. So he has an area of an effect attack there with a kick, and he also has 2 claws that he can fight with. So he was up here on this mountaintop training when he lost his entire team. And one of the reasons he lost because he was attacked by the monsters that are supporting Baron and the capturing of all the crystals. So that you learn about the character Golbez at this point. Golbez is the evil mastermind behind the king who's kind of swaying everyone towards world domination. So Yang joins you, Karate Man Yang. This reminds me of like a rap name. Was it Yin Yang Twins? I don't know. Anyway, we'll keep moving here. So we arrive at Fabul. We need to chat with the king, explain what's happened on the mountain there. Yang gets right into it, says, hey, we got a lot of problems here. Baron's mobilized its forces, the Red Wings, and ultimately there's this evil character called Golbez behind the whole thing. The king basically stares at the room and says, hey, all right, who are all these people? Cecil steps up, talks about how this isn't a time for words, this is really a time for action. And the king doesn't exactly trust a Dark Knight walking in, and maybe through some reputation of the way the Dark Knights have been historically. The team here is ultimately able to persuade the king with the help of Rosa and also Edward, who the king's familiar with. You know, obviously realizes, hey, this is another royal, and the story of them being attacked, their crystal being taken, him losing his parents, and also his beloved friend finally persuades the king to take action. So he asks for your help to defend the castle and ultimately the crystal, and then you start the defense of the castle. This doesn't exactly start off well. As before, the Red Wings fly over, start bombing the city. This is no way to deal with the beginning of a fight. You're just getting bombed, so they got to go back inside. They got to retreat into the inner castle. One thing I'll show you here is I'll just go ahead and fast forward all the way to the final defense of the castle. It's kind of a long, drawn-out scene. There's a lot of really cool parts in there, but I recommend you play it if you want to go through every inch of the game. I wanted to make this at least a high-level summary that would fit within 30 minutes. So Kane shows up, and instead of being your friend, has been now completely corrupted by Golbez and nearly finishes you off. So here you are fighting Kane, the Dragoon, which I don't know why they put Dragoon. They might as well just put Kane. You fall down. You're met with your near demise when in pops Rosa. And the influence that Rosa has over Kane will show up later in the game to actually change the dynamic and ultimately the team he's on. So a little bit of a spoiler there, but you do end the game with Kane on your team. And here is the first showing of Golbez. Like all evil characters, Golbez shows up and starts monologuing and ultimately is showing off his powers. So he fires some lightning out of his fingers, easily wipes both Edward and Yang out of the way, and shows really what he's capable of. So the control over Kane is one of the main aspects of this. Kane becomes a bit of his puppet for quite some of the game. Golbez at this point also takes Rosa hostage and promises that they'll see each other again. Now you're left with Rydia as the last person standing, Kane taking the crystal and giving a little bit of a parting shot here at Cecil, with having his narrow escape from their fight. I think it's pretty unfair when somebody can jump in the air like a Dragoon can and you can't hit him when he's in the air. But, you know, that's a dynamic that works on your behalf as well when he's on your team. So Rydia, as not only a summoner, but also as a black mage and a white mage, is able to cure the team, bring them back to their feet, and ultimately gathered the party back together to come up with a plan. So everyone's okay. Rose obviously was taken. The crystal was taken. And Cecil is just wondering, what did he do to deserve all of this calamity that keeps happening in his life? Rydia seems to be the most adult character here, given a bit of a pep talk. Let's get back on the mission. Let's do what we need to do. Edward rallies behind it. Ultimately, Yang does as well. And, the party is got to come up with a plan. We got to get the crystal back, and we have to get Rosa back. So while the party's resting up, they come up with a plan. Back in Baron, if you remember Sid's the master of airships. He has the capability of creating one for the party. And they also mentioned that the best way to get back to Baron and to be able to get to Sid is through the sea power. So the sea power of Baron is relatively weak, as mentioned. And they, from there, plot out a course. They need to go rest, and they need to talk to the king for ask permission for a ship. So the king was not mortally wounded, but at least pretty badly wounded from the attack. And the king absolutely sees no reason to deny him the request, considering all the things that they did. Also gives Cecil a gift from a former Dark Knight that lived there. He happens to have a sword that miraculously matches the complete set of armor that I have today. So it's the black sword. So as Cecil equips it, one of the cool things is now we have a matching whole set of armor, which throughout the game is a common theme. So let's go ahead and equip that to Cecil. And now I am the man in black. Bit of Johnny Cash there. With the ship in the harbor, we are off to Baron. And the team is fully rested up. So on the ship, we have a little bit of dialogue going on for quite some time. Once again, I'm going to cut this down. So as mentioned before, we're going to go head there, meet up with Sid, and along the ship's journey, calamity strikes once again. Leviathan, which is actually a summonable character later in the game for Rydia, attacks the ship. And nothing good comes when Leviathan hits. I thought it was Leviathan, back in the day, but I guess I mispronounced it. I read what I wanted to read. So Cecil wakes up, as he normally does, being knocked out, and wakes up on a beach by himself. This is actually an opportunity here. You'll see I'm level 20. You're by yourself. Go ahead and get to level 20 here. The fights are really simple before you come into the place Mysidia. Mysidia, if you remember from the beginning of the game, is the place where you got the first crystal for the king, and you did some pretty horrible things, killing a lot of their friends. So they don't let you forget it. They bring it up, as they should, but they at least hear you out. If you're coming here and you're talking about Golbez and you're talking about the king and his evil wishes, you would think that there's definitely a path that will at least hear you out. They also bring up that ultimately the Dark Sword and the powers of a Dark Knight is not what's going to be able to defeat Golbez. So they send you on a quest of sorts. They'd say, hey, why don't you go up Mount Ordeals and redeem yourself. I think a lot of the story that we're looking here is about redemption, renouncing evil and gaining the support of the light. And that's what they ask him to do. They say, hey, will you go up Mount Ordeals and will you become a paladin? He agrees to, and they're not going to let him go alone. So the comic relief at this part is Palom and Porum. They're actually wizards that together can have a spell that they can cast called Twin. And they are a really fun part of the early game. I really enjoyed having them. They have a lot of talent with them that you can actually really get some powerful spells. And speaking of powerful spells, so here we are at Mount Ordeal. You're going to notice that something really simple and familiar, which is casting ice to remove fire. So there's complementary spells for fire, ice, lightning, and water. And those spells throughout the Final Fantasy series interact with one another to create both positive and negative effects. So casting one would hurt someone a lot worse if they're of the opposite element. Let's put it that way. So here we are with Golbez trying to rule the world. He sends his dark minion Mylan to come visit you, and another familiar character here pops up called Tella. So Tella is on the mountain trying to find all of his lost spells. He finds that Medio could be returned to him and all of his lost spells if the power from the mountain could somehow help him. That's going to come in a little bit later with tied in with Cecil's redemption. So this is where Mylan, the minion of Golbez, comes in to fight you. Mylan is one of the first elementals you fight. You can actually hurt him with the opposing element. In this case, he can be damaged with heals. He could also be burned with fire, as he has undead that fights on his behalf. So we're going to, as always, just do a little fast forward through. Just going to show you the main fight, how we can damage them. See, Cecil is the opposite of Light. He's a Dark Knight, so he can't damage the evil creatures with his sword, and that's kind of the theme of this. Only the wielder of a light sword could do that, so a paladin. So that's one of the reasons for heading up the mountain looking for redemption. So this is the interesting part of the game. You're walking across, you've had your first fight. I didn't heal myself, and that was really dumb because I played this game quite a few times. I'm now fighting Mylan for a second time, and he's a lot harder. Notice that also my casters are on the front row. So one of the things you need to remember when you're playing this game is immediately, if you're surprised or you're ambushed, get your casters on the back. You'll see the first action I take with Cecil is to actually hit left, hit change. Look at that, I get hit for 106, nearly killed Palom there. So they went to the back row. I'm going to show you some of the dynamics of this fight. I went through a ton of cures trying to hurt Mylan. I finally kill him with the sword, but this fight is actually very difficult if you're not prepped for it. So after the first fight of Mylan, you need to heal yourself, and you also need to make sure you've got plenty of items on hand and keep everyone at a decent level of health. So with Mylan out of the way, in a comical way, you know, he basically gets beaten twice, falls off a mountain. You're going to be clear to head into the final area of Mount Ordeals, and in that area, it's your path to become Paladin. So shortly after this point, it's going to be about a quarter of the game through, so it's the perfect time to transition into the second video after this Mount Ordeal part. This is one of those things where do you pick in a game the best area to stop? You know, is it perfect midway in the game, or is it upon a major event? And I think that one of the biggest events in this game is this right here. You're switching from a Dark Knight, you're becoming a Paladin, you're embracing the light, you're giving up your evil ways, you're redeeming yourself. And the way that you do that is actually by fighting yourself. So when I first played the game, you know, there was very few guides to this, but my friends and I would play it, and we at least could play off each other's understanding of the game. And the way that you defeat yourself in your former ways is actually by not attacking yourself, by defending. And after a few rounds of parrying, I wish this Dark Knight attack was actually part of the early game. You know, wow, where did that come from? Nowhere, apparently. So maybe that was an early game when they were designing it. They said, hey, the Dark Knight should be able to fire this this wave attack. I wish. So this entire process is redeeming yourself for the light. And what the light is turns out to be a really interesting story. Probably in the fourth part of my series, you'll be able to see that. And that, you know, defending is actually part of the new character class, Paladin's skills. So you can actually cover your friends when they get down to a certain level of health, and they won't die. You'll actually take the attack. So now the light has embraced you. It gives you the last of its power to help stop Golbez. And at this point, I didn't realize when I first played the game how much game was left. There's actually a lot of game left. And when I originally recorded this, I thought I could fit this into just two 30-minute videos. I obviously was completely wrong by that. So what we're going to do here is to actually break this into 30-minute chunks, this being the first one, and we're going to have a 4-part series from what initially was going to be just a 2-part series. So Palom and Porom are obviously really happy that that happened. They were sent to spy on you of sorts, and they don't really say that much. They hint around it. But also, I talked about earlier that Tella now, with the light's help, has regained all of his spells. So he only had basic spells, but now he's learned Meteor. Meteor is the ultimate magic spell where it'll cast the dreaded 9999 on creatures. So Tella now is as powerful as it can be, and Cecil is a paladin. Perfect stopping point to the video. Hey, I really appreciate you watching this video. If you like it, give it a like. If you like the content, please think about subscribing. Please also take a look out for the next video, which will be the Paladin, part 2 of the series.